Welcome to another edition of Truth Bombs and Heart Nudges. Today we have a very special guest. Her name is Brianne Hogan. Welcome, Brianne.
Thank you, Lori. Thanks for having me here.
So we're going to go ahead and let Brianne tell us a little bit about herself.
Well, I'm a freelance writer. I've been a freelance writer for over 12 years. I've written for such publications like the Washington Post, BuzzFeed, Elle Canada, the BBC. I also have my own podcast that I launched in September. And I'm also I have two books that were published. I wrote astrology. One's called Friendship Signs, which is a book about astrology and friendships. And the other one is called Joy to the Stars, or Joy in the Stars. Sorry, I should know my own book.
I've done that. Don't worry.
It's a book I did with BuzzFeed about astrology and self-care. And I'm writing my own novel. I have a newsletter on Substack. I'm just someone who I'm just creating all the time. So that's pretty much my jam. I like creating. I like woo-woo stuff. And I like to be my own boss. That's why I'm an entrepreneur.
So how did you get into freelance?
Well, initially I went to school for acting. So I went to NYU. I wanted to be an actress. I was very narrow-minded about that. I was like, that's my thing. I'm going to win an Oscar. I'm going to do this. And I loved writing as a teenager. That was what I did in my free time, but I never saw it as a career option. I was just like, oh, I'm an actress. That's the thing. And I went to Lee Strasberg to continue my acting studies. And I didn't like the fact that actors were always waiting for a job. And I never really considered that part of what that industry is, because I always just saw being an actress and being in movies is so fun. Who would want to do that? But the reality is you're always waiting for a job. You're always waiting for someone to hire you. And there's an enormous amount of rejection. And that didn't sit well with me. And I think at that time too, I was probably just coming into my own. I mean, I was in my mid-20s, which some people could say is a late bloomer, but I was more understanding of what was truly right for me and my energy and who I was. And that was to create my own stuff. So I started writing plays. I wrote one play, and it was my first play ever. And I cast my friends, my acting friends, and I produced it in New York, off Broadway, in these little black box theaters. And I realized that I was I like writing. This was something that I really liked to do. I liked that autonomy, but I also, I liked the freedom. And it was just, when you know something that just genuinely lights you up, that was it for writing, in a way that acting never really felt that way to me, which was really odd, considering that I was that's what I was going to do, no matter what. So when it became clear to me, because I was living in New York at the time, and I'm from Toronto, that I couldn't keep doing my lifestyle that I was doing. I was at the time I was serving hot dogs. That was my summer job. I was 25, and that's all I could do to get work. And I was in school and writing these plays, because I wrote another one. And I was like, this is not my life. I don't like this life. This doesn't feel good to me anymore. So I went back to Toronto, and I still wanted to write. I still wrote plays, and I got into a few festivals in Toronto. But I thought, how can I make this into a career, not as a playwright, but as something that could help me survive? Instead of doing the survival jobs that I was really used to doing, waitressing and retail. So I just started out really small. I found my first job on Craigslist, which I don't recommend to people because I don't know how it's anymore. But that's I just found random blogging jobs, and I didn't have a lot of experience because I didn't go to school as a writer. It was, my background was dramatic literature and theater history, but yes, I wrote in school, but I didn't have any job experience as a writer, but I knew I could write. And so I think that confidence really helped me. And I just kind of fibbed those first kind of jobs that I got. I was just yeah, I can write about real estate. Yeah, I can write about your small business. I didn't have any background in any of that, but I really wanted to make it work. I knew that I could do it. So yeah, I had a lot of really crappy jobs in the beginning, but it helped me gain more confidence, gain more experience in my writing. And then eventually, like I always say to people, like professionalism is really important. And so is networking and in your connections, because every job since then has helped me get my next job. So I got my first big byline in Elle magazine because I knew someone from another job who helped introduce me to an editor. Like, so it kind of snowballed after that. And then it's like one job bleeds into the next. So yeah.
Did you have any heart nudges or truth bombs on your way into writing? Or was it a more subtle?
I always loved writing. And I think what was really revealing to me, and I was kind of like, you're so silly, Brianne, that you never saw it before, was the thing that came most naturally to me was the thing that I should have been doing all along. Because I was always writing as a kid, like even as a child, like I was there, I have notebooks and journals. Sorry, my cat is like
He wants in. He
She
wants to be
keeps
on.
jumping up. She just jumps up, jumps down, jumps up, jumps down. It's like, get away. Um, Mom's busy. All right, please. No, as I said, like I loved writing as a kid. Like I was the kid in school who, if you had a writing assignment, I would write like 30 pages. And meanwhile, every other kid's writing 3. But I'm like, because that was my thing. I loved it so much. I loved storytelling. As a teenager, like what I did for fun, because I'm like super nerdy, was like I would write stories on the weekends. Like I would write spec scripts about the X-Files because I love the X-Files. And I would write just stories. Like that was my thing. And so I never put 2 and 2 together, that the thing that I most loved and came really easily naturally to me was the thing I should have been doing all along. And I'm not saying acting isn't something that I, because I actually kind of am pursuing that now, but I don't think it was my path. And I think I was trying to force something. Yeah, I was trying to force something, but in reality, and I don't like to have any regrets, because I don't think that there's anything, like there's no such thing as a regret. But I will say I wish that I figured out the writing thing before, because I think I did a lot of trial and error with acting, and never really fell into alignment because it wasn't the thing that I was supposed to be doing. And once I landed on writing, things just became easier for me.
Yeah.
Like more opportunities came, and I'm always satisfied when I write. Like even if I'm just writing like a newsletter for, I love what I do. And that was something that I never got from acting. So yeah.
Yeah. I believe that our purpose is why we're here. It's like not something we need to search for. It's something we already are. But I think though it's so easily can tell ourselves, our minds are very powerful, that we can just say, yeah, I want to do this thing. I want to, because I was like, yeah, I'm going to be a singer, or I'm going to be this, but I never really sat down and considered, what does it take to be this? Is this really in alignment with what I really love to do? And I really relate well to, I used to write a lot too. I was also that student that I remember we had like a chunk of like poetry where we had to write different types of poems. And I would have all these, because I already like to write poems. And I remember sonnets, we had to write sonnets. And I wrote like 5, 6 people's different sonnets because they couldn't do it. And I loved it. I'm like, yeah, I'll write it for you. So I totally get that. But as far as woo-woo, so you keep saying you love the woo-woo. So can you expand on that for me, please? I like woo-woo.
I'm someone who just was always drawn to like something outside of myself. So I was raised Catholic, but I'm like a lapsed Catholic. Like I'm not religious. Like if you were to ask, I'm like spiritual. Like I'm not religious, but I do have a belief in God. Now it's not the God that I was taught in school, but it's a God that I think is just like source energy, universe, like whatever you want to call it, right? It's something outside of me, something that's created this beautiful world that we live in. Like, there's a power beyond what we can perceive with our 5 senses. And so that also extended to me as a teenager, like being interested in like tarot cards or like psychic readings and all these things. Like I used to go to this occult store when I was a teenager and just go look at the crystals and look at these tarot books and like astrology. That was another big thing. And just because I knew that there was something bigger than me and there was something bigger underlying my life. Now, even to this day, I'm still trying to figure out what that, what that looks like and feels like to me. It's a journey for me, but I do know that there is something bigger. And I do believe that we all are here for a reason. It's not arbitrary. And I also believe that we all have an intuition. It's just that our world as we know it has leaned on logic and knowledge, and not that those things aren't important, but the intuition about our lives and who we are, that's been removed. And the importance has been on just like facts and knowledge and logic. And I think that can deter us from our natural path in life, because we're not relying on ourselves, our connection to our soul, and our connection to our soul, which is connected to source, that helps our lives kind of sync up where it's supposed to go. And then I think we make things harder for ourselves, because we're not going naturally with the flow of life, or the flow of our life. Or like, it's like the whole law of attraction, like Abraham Hicks thing, like you're going upstream, not downstream with life, So that's something that I'm always aware of. Now I'm a Capricorn, so I can be very logical and practical. So I fight with myself a lot of times, not a lot, but I can see myself struggling when it's like, for instance, I quit my 9-to-5 job in September because I wanted to go back to freelance. And I knew right away that this job wasn't for me. And it's not that it was a bad job, and it's not like I couldn't do it, but I knew it wasn't. I just knew it. I just had this intuitive gut feeling. I've had it many times before in my life where I'm like, I'm not in alignment. My soul's like actually being like, why are you here? Like, this is not for you. But I kept at this job for like well over a year. And I fought myself the whole way. Like, I was complaining about it. I didn't like it. I didn't like who I was becoming from it. And I knew better. Like, it was like my higher self, if you want to say that, was like, what are you doing? Like, you just quit. Like, why aren't you quitting? And I was holding on to, the fear that we all have, the scarcity, not believing in myself, not trusting in myself, not trusting in what I was feeling was real. And then I just had a wake up call, and I was just like, no, like, life's too short to feel this way. You know better. So just do what you want to do.
Right.
And then I did it, and I feel a lot better. My energy, like my vibration, totally lighter. I have opportunities in freelancing still. I launched my podcast, which was something I always wanted to do, but I kept procrastinating it. Like, just like opening the space for more to come in. And I think that's a good reminder for me when I did that, was like, yeah, like, you can quit stuff that you're not aligned with and you'll be supported, and it's, it's okay. It's not always like a walk in the park. I don't want to underestimate quitting jobs and stuff, because I know that it's, people need to pay the bills and everything like I do. But there is, like, I think if you're in alignment with who you are, what you want to do, you're going to be supported.
Yeah.
So that was like an important lesson for me to learn, and I keep learning it.
Yeah, I think we all do. Because I relate to that story. I can, there's so many times that I find myself back where I'd already let go, and they're like, why am I back here? And it's because I've realized that, our journey is just lessons. And the reason I kept coming back there was because there was a lesson that I wasn't quite clicking with. And it wasn't until I was like, oh, that's why I'm doing this. Sometimes it's just a matter of asking deeper questions with yourself, like, why do I feel this way? Because I believe our soul's purpose, when we're not walking in our purpose, it's crying out to us in whatever way it can to try to get us to get back to what we're supposed to be doing. Because there's a disconnect. And that's why I always tell people, like, if you feel disconnected, or you're not happy going to this job and it feels like a job, and you're like, why am I here? Then you need to look deeper and be like, why am I here? Am I blocking myself from living my soul's purpose? Because I'm like you, I believe, and that's why I decided to have Truth Bombs and Heart Nudges podcast, is because love is always leaving us a trail, and it's just a matter of us paying attention. And I believe that the little heart nudges are meant to kind of gear us in the right direction. But if we keep missing them, then the truth bombs are coming, because they're like, you need this huge wake up call. And we need to get back connected with your soul's purpose, because if you're really unhappy, then you got to ask yourself, am I connected with my soul's purpose? Because that is like the first sign of being out of alignment is discontentment, because there's no greater contentment than when you're in your soul's purpose. So now I'm on a soapbox there for a minute.
No,
but
but I agree with everything you said. No, it's true. And I think it's also discontentment, but I also think it's also, and this is from my own experience as well, when you're too comfortable in life. Like when you're not regressing, but you're not progressing. You're just like going like a hamster wheel, and it's really comfortable, but it's like it's dull, but at the same time you're not leaving that life. Like I talk about, okay, so a truth bomb, because I was thinking like, what was a truth bomb that I can think about recently? But it was back in 2017, and I was freelancing. So I was living in Toronto, and life was okay. Like I was going to this boxing club every day that became like this new community in my life. But I wasn't growing as an artist, and I wasn't growing as a person, and I wasn't growing in other areas of my life, like my personal life. And I became entrenched in a community that was somewhat positive, but also somewhat toxic. And it felt like I had actually gone backwards. And I was also in this entanglement with this man that I should have never been in. But yet, and I think like my old self wouldn't have been with this guy. Me right now would never have been with this guy. But wherever I was in that timeline of my life, I never questioned it, even though I should have, but I went with it. And it was very toxic. Like, it was very dysfunctional. And my parents were moving to the East Coast. They were moving to Prince Edward Island. They were going to retire. They're out there now. So they were going to retire out there. And I was going to stay where I was. And I got an apartment, like a new apartment. And it was awful. Like, this apartment was awful. Oh, and I got a waitressing job, like, which I had never, I waitressed, like, as I was saying, like I've had many waitressing jobs, but it was something that I hadn't done for a long time. But I felt I had to support myself. I'm a terrible waitress. Like, I shouldn't be. I mean, I'm okay, but I'm not someone who loves that job. So I shouldn't be doing it, So, but I did it because I didn't trust myself with my writing. I was just coasting. And this apartment that I moved into was awful. I was in a basement apartment, and the tenants upstairs were just like horrible. My landlords were not good people. And I finally like looked at my life, and I was just like, what the hell am I doing? Like, I don't even feel like these dreams and goals that I had as a teenager. I wanted to go to NYU. And even when I, moved away from acting and wanted to be a writer, and I had dreams as a writer, I wasn't going any direction, even as my personal life, like dreams of being in a partnership. I was like, what am I doing? And then I'm living in this shitty apartment. I was like, what? Like, this is not what I wanted for myself. So then my landlord, after like the zillionth complaint that I had about these tenants upstairs who had like scary dogs and loud noises, and anyways, like they filled a bathtub up with so much water, the water would go into my apartment. It's like, anyway, they gave me an out. They're like, you can break your lease. I was in only 2 months, and they're like, you can break your lease. We won't penalize you. You can break your lease. And my parents were leaving to go to PEI, Prince Edward Island, like in 3 weeks or something. So my parents' house was like gone. And I was like, okay. And so I moved with my parents. I was like 35, and I moved with my parents across country to Prince Edward Island. We did not know anybody there. And they were having a house built. So we lived in this tiny rented cottage for this first 6 months. Like, it was small. And I lived on the top floor, which is that's it. It was only one room upstairs with no door. I did not have a door. And I was living with my parents with no door, with like very little privacy. And it was the best thing I ever did for myself. Like, on paper, it looks like really messed up. Like, Brianne, like, you're moving cross country with your parents at 35. You're living with them in a small cottage. You don't know anyone there. But it was the best thing I could have done for myself. I extracted myself out of very toxic and dysfunctional situations. And it was like a wake up call for me to be like, okay, well, what do you want to do with your life? Like I had no distractions because I was on this desolate island in the middle of winter. And it really helped me get back to who I was and who I wanted to be. Like it was like a reset.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I believe we need that sometimes. We get complacent, like you were saying, we get complacent and yet we feel like something's missing, but we're so okay with the complacency that it takes like a big shock to get us to be like, ugh, this isn't what I want. And so I think, yeah, that was like what sounds wonky on paper can be actually what you really need to get your soul back into alignment with your mind and your thinking. And yeah, I've definitely been there. And I think other listeners can probably relate to that. This sounds crazy. And people are like, that sounds crazy. What are you doing? But deep down in your soul, you're like, no, this is something I need to do. And I think even though COVID has been horrible for some people, I think there's been a bunch of us, and not me included, that it was a huge reset for me. It allowed me to really take a step back and go, what am I really supposed to be doing? Because my soul had been crying out for many years, like, this isn't what you're supposed to be doing. This isn't what you're supposed to be doing. And again, I definitely relate to I'm taking these jobs because I feel like I have to, but in reality, because logic is saying, yes, I have to do this thing, but logic isn't always correct.
No,
Yeah.
no, it's not. I mean, it can help you in certain situations, but when you rely on it too much to lead your life, you end up living someone else's life, I think, because like what at the end of the day, it's like, whose logic though? You know what I mean? Like we grow up in this culture and we think, oh, we should get married by this age, or it's not logical. Like in my instance, it's not logical for a grown woman to still live with her parents. And, like it's just a lot of BS because it's like, by whose logic? Like who says these things are what we ought to do? You're here to create your own life, whatever that might look like for you. There is no right or wrong way to live. I think it's only becomes wrong when you're not being true to who you are, you know? So, yeah, in 2017 to 2019 was my pandemic because I was, like very isolated for a long time and living with my parents and like going through a lot of childhood trauma, reliving and like healing a lot of childhood stuff. And it was very confronting, but it was the best thing that I could have ever done for myself. And during those 2 years, my freelance career took off more. I got bigger bylines. I got a publishing deal. I got my literary agent. And I don't think that's random. I don't think that was a coincidence. Like some of my friends were like, well, wow, that was like that year in PEI, like it really changed your life, or those 2 years. And I was like, it did. And it was because I made that choice. I mean, I had that truth bomb come and like be like, you can break your lease. I could have said no. I could have been like, no, I'll stick it out. But I knew it was a sign from God. I knew it was like, this is your exit. So either you take it or you want to just stay with the status quo. And I did. And I didn't know, like how my life would transform from that choice, but it did. And I think it expanded me and opened me up in these big ways. And like I said, I don't think those opportunities coming to me was coincidental. I would think it was because I had shifted. So I allowed those things to come to me.
Yeah, I think that our greatest learning moments are when we logically try to figure out a how and we can't see one. Those are our greatest learning moments because the how isn't what's important. It's trusting that it will all work out for your good anyway, even though right now everyone's like, that doesn't logically make any sense, but it's what I need. And so it's understanding, and trusting your own intuition when it's guiding you, when everyone else is like, that doesn't make any sense. I've heard that so many times in my life. What are you doing? That doesn't make, you're going to do what? And I'm like, I'm trusting that this is what's right for me because my soul is calling out for this thing. And so even there's times where I'll get stuck and be like, how is that even going to happen? When I just go, okay, these are one of those moments where, you know what? I don't need to know the how. I just know that it will. It's going to do it. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Actually, today I was thinking about that. as I was like washing the dishes, and I was like, it's not really about the how and the when. It's about the what and the why. You know, like, what do you want? Like, because I don't think a lot of people actually ask themselves that. What do you want? Because I think they're scared to actually own what they want. It's scary to own what you desire because you're scared to not get it. You know, once you say what you want, it's like, oh shit, what if I don't get it? Well, then underlying that, that's the underlying issue, is you thinking you can't get what you want. And it's the why too. It's like, why do you want what you want? Because we can want $1 million, sure, but it's like, why do you want it? You know, and that's important to know. Why do you want it? Is it to have freedom? Is it to have a life of luxury, like travel more, own your own business? Like, what is it? Like, why? And I think those things are needed to be more intentional about your life, because then you're sending a signal to the universe of like, this is what I want and why I want it. And so together, like, you can help make that happen. But the how, you have no control over that. Just like you don't have the control over the when. You know, it's futile. It's like, when will I get this? It's like, you don't know. Sorry. I mean, we all want to know, but we kind of have, those are the two things we have to let go.
Yeah. Learning to step out in faith. And that's why I'm always telling people, you need to not just trust that everything's going to work out, but trust you, trust what's inside of you, trust those choices, trust those nudges, trust those truth bombs. Because you get them for a reason. You don't just get these heart nudges for no reason at all. There's a reason behind it.
Yeah. 100%. There is a reason. It's just allowing yourself to trust yourself. As you said, that's been a major piece of the puzzle for me over the last 2 years, is the self-trust, because underneath that is the self-worth issue. Like this, like, am I worthy of going all in on my dreams? And do I really believe that I have what it takes? Because it's not just, you know, letting the universe just like pour riches all over you. Like, you need to take the action as well. You need to take those inspired steps, but those steps are scary, and they are. Like, me quitting my job was scary. Like, me starting a podcast, I'm sure for you, it's scary to start these new things in our lives and putting our voices out there and our opinions. It's scary. But if that's what you want to do, like, that's what you've got to make those steps. Like, you've got to take that action. And then I do think like that comes from a place of trusting yourself. Like, I trust that I can do this. I trust that I can make a podcast. I trust that someone who connects to my voice is out there, because I trust that I have something worthy to say, you know? And so it's like a dance you do with the universe, where you're like, yeah, I trust I'm supported for something bigger than me, but I trust me too, you know?
Yeah, there's that connection. Yeah.
Because
and not only that, because there's times sometimes, you know, when we do have that fear, and I have found though, when you step into that fear of not knowing the how, is the most freeing. Because when you get to the other side and you see, oh, this is what was going on, this is amazing, it's freeing. And none of that, but it shows you what you're made of, and it shows you your strength, and it shows you that fear is just a mirage. It's just, I've learned to see it as a signal that when something starts to rise up, I mean, like there's a fear of what's going to happen type of thing, I know I'm on something, I'm about to step into something amazing, because that's the only time that it ever seems to pop up, is when I'm about to try something new. And that new thing always brings forth some huge harvest. Something amazing always happens. So for anyone out there who's thinking, oh my gosh, but it's so scary, but it's just a mirage. It's like when it's hot out and it looks like water up ahead, there's not really water there. So what you're thinking is up ahead, it's not even there.
Yeah. It's, well, our minds really can play tricks on us. Like, we really can, you know, we play a story, and typically I think it's the same story that we tell ourselves, like, oh, it's, you know, I can't do this. Again, I think it's really rooted to the self-trust and self-worth thing. It's like, oh, I can't do that, or people won't like me, or, you know, like just these really debilitating things that we can talk ourselves into doing. And, you know, it took me 2 years to launch a podcast. Like, it was something I really wanted to do. I was called to do it. I knew I was called to do it, because as you were saying, like, these little things you hear, these little whispers, these nudges, like, they're your intuition, which I think is just your soul speaking to you. And they're telling you, like, you know, they're giving you these little hints, like, this is for you. Like, this is something you should try. This is good for you. And it took me 2 years to do it, because procrastination is a real thing. And procrastination is a form of fear. And for me, I've learned, because I can procrastinate in my work, where I'm like, I'm a fear of failure. I'm a recovering perfectionist. I'm a fear of not getting it perfect, not getting it right, not saying the right thing, or sounding smart, or sounding funny, or like whatever. And it got to the point, well, I quit my job, so I had lots of free time, but I also got to the point where I was like, I'm just going to do it messy, which was a huge thing for me.
Mm-hmm.
But by doing it messy, it took away the fear factor of it, because I got out of my own way. I got out of my head, and I was like, I'm just going to do it messy. Like, I'm going to, do what I can to the best of my ability, of course, but I don't care if it's not perfect. Like, my graphics at the beginning of my Instagram were awful. Like, they were hideous. But I had to be like, I don't care. I have it out. It's done. Like, I was lucky enough, for the first couple of episodes I recorded with friends, and I listened to them back, and I was like, I don't think they were good. And, so I was able to say, let's do it again. But I redid them because, you do want to make sure you come off as a somewhat of a professional thing. But at the same time, I wasn't like too much into myself, where I was like, I can do it again. Like, that's okay too. Like, I can say, this wasn't great, so let's do it again. So I think it's just doing it. Like, once I got going with that, and it's the same thing with my freelance writing. Like, once I got going with whatever I wanted to do, and then I was like, why didn't I do this sooner?
Right.
Why did it take me 2 years to start the podcast? Like, it wasn't as scary as I thought it was going to be, or hard. It's not just scary. It's like people think, oh, it's gonna be so hard. And like, I learned how to edit my own podcast. Yeah, it takes time. You got to watch the YouTube videos, and you might not go out that Saturday night, but oh well. You know what I mean? Like, it's
Yep.
like it's like one Saturday night out of your life is going to kill you. No. And then it's worth it, though, because the value that you're bringing to your own life, into other people's lives, it's worth, watching Audacity videos on YouTube and figuring out editing. Like, and then, as you said, like, you start learning more about yourself, and you start getting confident about yourself and your own skill set and new strengths. Like, I didn't think I could do a podcast or edit it and like figure out the music and figure out how to book guests and all this stuff. Like, being confident enough to reach out to strangers and be like, do you want to be on my podcast?
Yep.
Yeah. But then you just do it, and you're like, it's not that big of a deal. I didn't die.
Right. Yeah. They're all stepping stones. I feel like everything is just a lesson. And it's what you take from that lesson, and not what I go down the rabbit hole. That's what I call it. The guilt and shame, or I should have, I could have, would have, wish I would have kind of thing. And just say, you know what? That was then, this is now. I've learned since then. I'm a whole new person since then. One of the things, one of my little truth bombs I had one day, since we're talking about the how, I kept telling myself, I don't know how. I don't know how. I don't know how. And then finally I heard, what do you mean you don't know how? You already have everything inside of you to do everything you're meant to do. What do you mean you don't know how? And I kind of went, oh yeah, you're right. I already have everything inside my, what am I saying? So now whenever I would catch myself saying, I don't know how, I'm like, doesn't matter. I figure it out. Right. I learned how to walk. I learned how to run. I learned how to talk. I'll figure it out.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And I think too, like, if that thing you want to do is making you question, you don't know how, I think you already know how to do it, because you wouldn't want it if you didn't know how to do it.
Yeah.
Again, it's like, that's a very simple thing to say, and I know there's a lot more that goes into it, but I do think it's true. Like, people, like, if you have a dream to write and you're like, I don't know how to write. Well, if you have a dream to write, you probably do know how to write. Do you need to take lessons? Yeah, maybe you need a coach. Like, maybe you just need to just do it.
Just do it.
Like, I think we stop ourselves from doing what we really want to do too often, because we think we don't know how, or we think that we're not going to be good at it. And it's like, well, who says? Like,
exactly.
You know?
And it's funny that you bring up writing too, because I was always wanting to write. And that was one of my struggles, is like, oh, I can't. And finally, again, I heard, what do you mean you can't? You haven't even tried. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, just do it.
Just try. There's so many opportunities to do it. I mean, like, there's Substack. It's the newsletter that I have now. And like even with me, like as I said in the beginning, like me trying to find those early freelance jobs, like as I said, I didn't have clips. Like I didn't have anything to show for myself except just, I guess, a little bit gumption, but just being like, yeah, I can try, and uh, you'll be surprised by, you can be surprised by yourself or at yourself when you just say, yeah, yes. And that's like, I took improv for a number of years, and you just like, when you yes and yourself, just be like, yeah, I'll figure it out. Like, I think we're a lot more resilient than we think we are. Like you'll figure it out. Like if that's something you really want to do, like if you really want to be a writer, you really want to be a podcaster, you really want to be whatever, like you'll figure it out. Just if an opportunity comes to you too, that's another thing too, where I think people don't apply for jobs or they don't pitch to a magazine or whatever because they're like, well, I don't know if I could do it. Figure it out. Like you'll figure it out. You can do it, because sometimes you have, I find anyways, for me, when I'm pushed to do something, yeah, I surprise myself because I'm like, bam, like I get shit done. And I didn't even know that I could, but it's because I was like, yeah, I'll do it. I don't know how, but yeah, I'll do it. And then somehow you do it.
Yep. Just push your way through. So if you could give just like one tip of advice to the listeners on anything you want at all, what would that be?
Oh, wow.
I know, okay, 300 the bus there.
Well, I think, and this is, maybe a little bit of a shameless plug for my podcast, but my podcast is called Do You, and I have a tattoo. It says Do You, and I got that before the podcast, so I didn't get the tattoo for the podcast. Brand myself permanently. And it's just because it's a thing that stuck with me when someone said that to me. I mean, it's a little bit overplayed now. Do you, but when it was said to me, like in the early 2000s, it was because I was getting wrapped up in what other people were doing. And I was in the comparison thing where you're comparing your life to other people, the FOMO, like just not really concentrating or focusing the energy and attention onto myself and who I really am and what I really want for me and what my life, regardless of what it looks like to other people. And this woman was just like, just do you, Brianne, like, do you, like, stop, like looking at other people, stop trying to be like other people or compare yourself to other people, like, do you. And that really stuck with me because I think there's a lot of paradigms out there in our culture, whether it's like you want to fit into the 9 to 5 or you have to be in a partnership or you need to be married or you need to have children, like especially as women. And I think we take those on and we don't take the time to really think, like, is this what I want? Is this my life? Does this feel good to me? And I think you do yourself a disservice by not allowing yourself to be true to who you are and doing you in whatever capacity that might be, because that's what you're here to do. Like, you're here to be you. Like, you're here to do you. Like, you're here to be yourself, whatever that might be. And if it doesn't look like what you've been shown, if it doesn't look like what your family does, that's okay, because you're not supposed to be like anybody else. And I think we can get really tripped up in, well, this is not how it's been done, or, I need to have this. And it's like, but do you want that? And who cares if it's never been done, because you're here now and maybe you're here to change things, So that's what that's like my whole thing in my own life and what I hope other people continue to do, because when we are true to ourselves and we help each other and we help give each other examples of what's possible.
I love that. And I'm going to add on to the whole FOMO thing. What I've realized is when you are not living in soul's purpose, that is when you feel like you're missing out on something. It's because you literally are, because your soul is like, you need to be doing this thing. So here's like my little truth bomb to you. If you feel like you are missing out on something and you're always wanting to be here and there, look deeper. It's not something outside of you that you're missing out on. It's something inside of you that you're missing out on.
Yeah. I love that. Yeah, that is very true. Yes.
That just came out of nowhere. Thank you so much for being on Truth Bombs and Heart Nudges. I have loved listening to your stories and your nudges.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you for having me. Thank you for allowing me to share them.
I do. I love it. I might have you back again because I want to hear more about this freelance thing. Because like I said, I love to write, but I don't feel like that's mine. I don't feel like I'm missing out on it, but I still would like to hear more about it because maybe someone out there is like, how do I get into freelance?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
maybe we'll have you back just to do truth bombs and heart nudges for those out there who are like, I don't know where to start.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd love to share that. I think, I think a lot of people, as I said before, I think they're scared to do the writing thing. And if I can help like pull back the curtain, because it's not that scary once you get started.
Right. Okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Lori. Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.